Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine. Welcome to this series where I help you understand Waldorf-inspired homeschooling. Today we're talking about Charlotte Mason and Waldorf. How do you put them together? What are their similarities and what are their differences? Because the Charlotte Mason philosophy is a wonderful philosophy that is so popular amongst homeschoolers, but is actually very different from the Waldorf approach. Even though there are some aspects that are similar, I find that there are more aspects that are different, but there are still some ways that you can combine the two. So today we're going to be talking about two specific things regarding the Charlotte Mason philosophy and the Waldorf approach, and that's specifically on living books and the duration of lessons, because here are two areas where each of these philosophies differ quite a bit. So the Charlotte Mason philosophy talks about living books, and living books, different from textbooks, are the books that are usually written by a single author, usually an author who is passionate about the subject area and has collected work that is inspiring to read, it's engaging, and you really feel like you're right there with the author, discovering and learning about that topic area. It differs from textbooks, which are generally written by multiple authors. They have a bit more of a dry approach, a little more factual, and not so engaging. Now, in the Waldorf approach, we're not using living books to deliver lessons. We are, as teachers and as parents, reading the information ahead of time. We're processing it, digesting it, mulling it over, and then presenting the lesson like we are the living book. We are presenting the lesson with our own enthusiasm now that we have processed the information. It really feels like a conversation sometimes when we are homeschooling, and when you are teaching in a class setting, can really feel like you're connecting with the students because you yourself have absorbed the information and you've processed it and you really own it as your own when you're delivering the lesson. So both of these approaches are quite different in what resources you're going to be using in order to present the lesson. So how do you use living books in a Waldorf approach? Well, before we can figure out how we can use those living books in a Waldorf approach, let's figure out why you would use living books in the Charlotte Mason approach rather than you as a teacher or as a parent re-narrating that content in your own words. So the Charlotte Mason approach views living books as somewhat of a perfection in content. So not perfect, but you can see that the author has researched, is passionate, has written, rewritten, uses rich language, has had it edited, and now presents this final product that is the best work. And you have this beautiful living book that now you can present to your children as if the author is right there with the author's words and the author's illustrations. So to take that almost perfected work and then to read it yourself and then present it in your own words, it's like you're diluting that beauty, that content, that rich vocabulary by now using your own words to explain that book. And so the Charlotte Mason approach prefers that you use those living books rather than you re-narrating or narrating that content to your student. Now, when we're looking at how we're going to use these books and or how to present these lessons, we also have to bear in mind the duration of these lessons. So here's another really big difference between the Charlotte Mason approach and the Waldorf approach. In the Charlotte Mason approach, she advises to have short lessons, especially when the children are quite young. We're looking at lessons that are maybe 5 to 10 minutes long when the children are maybe 6, 7, or 8 years old, and then increasing in duration as the children get older. So maybe the lessons end up being 30 or 40 minutes long as the students get older. In the Waldorf approach, you're looking at lessons that are about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours long, which is considerably longer than the Charlotte Mason approach for the lessons. So how are we going to take these longer lessons for a Charlotte Mason approach or these shorter lessons and include them in the Waldorf approach? Well, there's one more thing that we have to consider when we're looking at the differences between the Charlotte Mason approach and the Waldorf approach, and that is the amount of lessons or the variety of lessons that you're going to be doing either in a day or throughout the semester or in a year. In the Waldorf approach, you're looking at main lesson blocks that run around 3 to 6 weeks. These main lesson blocks focus on one subject area that you do daily for your main lesson, which is about 2 hours long, versus the Charlotte Mason approach, which will have many different lessons throughout the day and throughout the year. And these lessons are going to be very short. So the Charlotte Mason approach to the short lessons and to the variety of lessons is so that the students are engaged in the learning, they're learning that new content, and then before the student can become disengaged or lose focus in the lesson, you close the lesson and you move on to another lesson. In this way, you don't create the bad habit of getting distracted during your lesson or becoming unfocused. You're staying focused in the lesson because the lesson is short and because you're using engaging books like living books, and you're keeping any work that the student has to do to a minimum before you move on to another subject area, so that that student is always engaged in a learning that is interesting for them before they can lose interest. This is drastically different from the Waldorf approach, which has a much longer block for your main lesson. However, the new learning for the main lesson is maybe only about 20 to 30 minutes. The remainder of the time is used for other activities within the main lesson. So for the main lesson, you're also looking at the lesson work that you have to do for that learning. And it's not usually the learning that you just did that you're doing the lesson work for. You're actually doing the lesson work from your previous day or 2 days prior learning. So the way that the main lesson is broken up is that you begin with your opening activities and then your review, and then a big block of time is for your lesson work. But you haven't actually done a lesson yet, so your lesson work is actually from the previous day's new lesson. And then at the very end of the lesson is when you do your new learning, which can take 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer, depends on the new lesson. So this is quite different from the Charlotte Mason approach. So now, how do we take these longer lessons that are less varied and storytelling driven compared to these shorter lessons using living books that have quite a variety? How do you put those two together? There is a way. So the way that I've put these two philosophies together, well, actually, let me tell you the way that I used to do it that was the wrong way. Before I really understood the main lesson block and the Charlotte Mason approach, I was still new to both of the philosophies. And I would end up doing all of our main lessons like Charlotte Mason lessons. And this did not work at all. It was very frustrating for everyone involved. And I found that it was impossible for me to actually do lessons this way because I was spending so much time doing my Charlotte Mason approach, thinking I have to do such a variety of lessons, but each lesson was taking an hour or more to do, and it just wasn't working, especially when the illustrations for those lessons also took a lot of time. So we're not going to be able to do the variety of lessons for our main lesson if you want to put those two philosophies together. However, here's the trick where you can combine both of them. You can take your opening activities and your daily work to include a variety of subject areas as you would with the Charlotte Mason approach. So let's take our opening activities for instance. Opening activities generally take up about 30 to 40 minutes of our whole main lesson block time. In that time, we're doing activities that are engaging for the student and are transition activities that invite them into a learning space and transition them out of whatever they were doing prior. Maybe they were playing, or maybe they were just getting ready for the day, and we're moving into our lessons for the day. The opening activities help transition my students from one activity to the other. So some of my morning activities or opening activities are ones that are highly engaging, very entertaining, and sort of set the stage for the learning for the day. So we might include some picture books or some games or some handwork or something that is tactile for the students, something that's going to be really enjoyable for them and something that they look forward to. That activity may take 5, 10, 15 minutes at most before we move on to another opening activity. Now you could stop there and just do your 15 minutes or just one game before moving on to your main lesson, but I like to do a couple of things. At this time for our opening activities, in addition to a game, which they are educational games, so you're looking at also gaining a little bit of content and information or skills in that time, I also like to include some picture books. And my picture books are almost always living books. In fact, most of the books that I have, I try to have them be living books so that whenever we are utilizing books in our opening activities or for our main lessons, which I do as well, I know that they are living books, which I find are going to be more engaging for my students, and we're going to have a better outcome for understanding that information. So now we've done a game, maybe a picture book. Now we still have a little more time with our opening activity before I wear out my children by doing an opening activity that takes too long. So if I exceed more than 40 to 50 minutes, then I've sort of drained my children. So I don't want to go quite that far. But your opening activities could be a great time for you to have a collection of books in different topic areas. So a collection of living books in a variety of topic areas so that you can do your short 5 to 10 minute lessons as part of your opening activities before diving into your main lesson for the day. So in this way, you can include your living books as part of your opening activities that are your variety of lessons. So you're getting maybe 4 lessons in your opening activities and then engaging into the main lesson. Now you can also use your daily work as an opportunity to include other lessons as well. For us, daily work tends to be math and language arts. And so we're getting a little bit of math and language arts on a daily basis, even if our main lesson isn't in math or language arts. So how can you use living books as part of your main content for a Waldorf main lesson block? Now, when I was first starting to homeschool, I rarely had time to prepare my lessons for my Waldorf approach. And so on many occasions, I would use living books to present the content for my students rather than me reading the content ahead of time and then presenting it to my students. And in this way, I was able to use living books with my main lesson block and deliver lessons even if I didn't have time to prepare for them. I did need to find the books ahead of time, but if I didn't have time to prepare the lesson, I would certainly read from the living books. Now, how can you include some of these Waldorf principles into your Charlotte Mason approach? So suppose you are doing almost completely Charlotte Mason and you want to explore a little bit of the Waldorf approach, because so far we've looked at 2 different ways that we can include Charlotte Mason into the Waldorf approach. Now let's look at the flip side. So my favorite way to include Waldorf into a Charlotte Mason approach is to keep everything you're doing with your Charlotte Mason approach exactly the same, but to only add one additional thing. And that's to focus on a main lesson block, or if you prefer, a unit study for a period of time so that you're still doing all of your smaller lessons, your daily work, but now you're going to focus for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half on a particular subject area that you can dive deep into it. You can do projects for, field trips, you can include food if it's possible, or anything else that's creative to engage your children in that focused period of time when you are looking at a single subject area. Now, if you're not sure where to start, you can just take a topic area that your children are already interested in. Now, this might be a very short unit, maybe a week long, on a particular animal that your children are really interested in, or a particular time period, or a particular science subject. There are many ways that you can do a really miniaturized main lesson block as a unit study. The main difference, I would say, between a main lesson block and a unit study, if you're considering the philosophy, is that the main lesson blocks are developmentally appropriate for your students and follow the Waldorf pedagogy in how you present those lessons. So you could certainly do a miniaturized unit study that lasts a week long, but if you want to get the full benefit of the Waldorf approach, then you also want to look into the child's development and choose a particular subject area that matches the child's development and supports that child through that growth, through those stories, and through those lessons. I hope this was helpful in understanding the Waldorf-inspired approach to homeschooling and how you can include the Charlotte Mason philosophy with your Waldorf approach, or vice versa, include Waldorf into your Charlotte Mason approach. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video, where you can find more information about this entire series where I cover so many more topics. You can find the link to that blog post in the description box below. And if you'd like to see what we're reading on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.